Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second episode of Virtual Workspaces 2.0, a series of virtual panel discussions where we talk about future ready, tech aided business solutions that can help redefine the digital workplace. This episode is titled Enabling Boundaryless Future Offices, and today I'm joined by a panel of esteemed thought leaders who will help us understand how organizations can leverage technology to optimize employee engagement as well as manage consumer expectations, all the while working virtually. I would like to introduce you to all our panelists. Siddharth Saxena, Vice President IT at Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited. Jatin Meswani, Client Unit Leader West Infrastructure Services at IBM. Sushil Shanbag, Vice President IT at HDFC Bank. And Hari Nair, Vice President Solution Technical Specialist at Tata Communications. A very warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin with a keynote presentation by Mr. Nair and then proceed to our panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Nair.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining, everyone. What I'll quickly do is present a quick set of slides which will set context to our discussion going ahead.
Request all our panelists to keep the cameras off and while Mr. Nair presents. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope everyone can see my slides. Is that good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so very quickly, what we have tried to put together is a scenario where we are relooking at, how we have seen in the initial phase of the lockdown, there were certain things which customers had to do very quickly. Now, as we are moving on and we are doing, creating a new way of working, we are realizing that there is a lot we can do, despite the limitations which we have. And how do we actually address some of these areas? So when we looked at it, we looked at it from four distinct areas. One, we have been talking about digital first for quite some time, and many customers who have had a digital kind of a platform already built, they are now looking of making it a lot more agile, a lot more flexible for their end purpose. Now, in order to do that, they had to create specific digital platforms for their individual delivery models. So create a digital model for every part of the chain of the services. Now that's one area which we have seen a lot of traction on. The other one is in terms of harness the data to create a new competitive edge. Now, what we have seen, because we have to go digital, we have to have the right choice of customers we try and address, and to identify the customer has become the key. The attention span versus for a person or the digital media is something very important. You have to get their interest very quickly. The key was to actually create a competitive advantage, and there are scenarios where we have had the entire physical process convert to a more digital process through this channel. And finally, all this is great, but you have to have security as a core element when you are actually addressing this going forward. Now, in order to do this, what we started looking at network from a perspective of we provided network services for our customers. How has it changed at a very basic level? If you really look at it, the customers today can come through any of these channels. They used to always do it, but this has become more prevalent now. Instead of the walk-in, which used to happen to a branch or a physical interaction, people are preferring the more digital channel. They are accessing the client's content in one of these three ways. They are either going through their data center of the enterprise, or maybe some kind of a SaaS application or a front end which is created by the customer. And finally, they are served either in one of these places, which is either the HQ, the branch, or the contact center, or more importantly, is the employee sitting at home. Now, in order to stretch all these people who have been working in a very secure environment to this employee who's working from home and has a certain quality of network which he has, how do you actually ensure that the quality can be maintained, the performance is guaranteed, and at the same time the trick is on my digital footprint, ensuring that this customer is served by this employee in a more seamless manner. So we are seeing a lot of this happening as we evolve, and we actually try to work with our enterprise customers. Now, in moving on, we looked at it holistically, and we saw that customers require to do all this with some kind of an orchestration layer, which can be easily enabled in order to actually allow their traffic to move in whatever direction they want. So we looked at how do you actually define any equipment which is there on this in the offices. How do you actually ensure that the employee at home is taken care of, and all these people can easily switch to any of the environments based on whatever traffic they are trying to actually consume. So this is an area which we spent in order to create an integrated multi-services platform, which can cater to all kinds of requirements, maybe voice for our contact center customers, via SBCs, data for all customers, and ensuring that a security layer is embedded whenever we are providing any services to our customers. Now, in order to do that, we predominantly, when we looked at customers trying to access the new way of accessing data, we looked at it from three specific use cases. Use case number one is when customer or their end customers are actually trying to access the cloud-based applications or SaaS-based applications. They have to access it over an untrusted network. The performance can be suboptimal. So, the application has to become smarter. The network has to become smarter, and the app which may be sitting at the customer end has to become smarter. So, how do you actually enable that, and how do you actually ensure that you have visibility for that performance, visibility for their transactions? We have customers who come back to us and said, guys, I have had customers enter my digital channel, but 30 suddenly only a 30% conversion rate, and 30% in some industries can be quite high, but 30% when a person is filling a form or entering a data, and you have drop rates beyond that, what happens? What can you do to build that visibility during that phase? That is something which we had to actually look at. We had to also look at if there was any specific productivity drops either from the employee end or when the customer is actually interacting with the employee. So these are areas which are an area of concern when we are moving stuff completely into the cloud. Now, how do we actually address it? Some of this are quick solutions. I think VDI was one quick one which took care of the issue of governance and untrusted network, or for that matter, any kinds of data which is getting lost because sensitive data for a bank, which can be picked up or copied by someone locally. Now, VDI was something which we saw across the board. Many customers actually deploy. What we added onto that is a concept known as App WAN, which is the ability to actually just put extra software on that same PC and ensure that the quality of the service which you are enjoying on that network, whatever be the network, because when we are sitting in the metro, quite often we have a decent amount of network, and we have the ability to switch maybe multiple broadband providers. But what about a person who is sitting in a smaller town or a city, and he has gone there because he can't continue in the city for very long? How do you actually assure the quality of service, ensure that the performance can be built up? And app WANs have the ability to actually compress data, add multiple layers of security, in fact 5 layers of security, and bring down the overall cost and efficiency of the network, and actually multiplying it in terms of performance. So these are some areas which we saw, especially for customers with workloads completely on a cloud-based service. The second set of customers, when we looked at it, was purely from a perspective of, can you secure my network? I have all these environment. I'm a bank. I may not have too many options to do. I may have a remote user, and that's about it. But I would have to operate some of these as they were, maybe with a lesser capacity. So what do we do? What do we actually ensure in this kind of a scenario? Even when you have to move workloads onto the cloud. Now, you did movement on the cloud mainly because it provides that flexibility. It provides that digital front end which you have to do in order to allow your customers to actually have new services. What has been done is actually put a multiple layers. I mean, SASE has been a term which has been used by Gartner some time back. But the key elements are, the element of zero trust, the element of better visibility to what is happening on your network, the ability to actually analyze your data, and ensure that you take right decisions at the right point of time, and you leverage platforms in order to do this. These are some areas which we saw, especially customers who are trying to move into a more secure environment, similar kind of infrastructure as they were, but in order to ensure that there is better control as they transfer from probably a very secure environment to an application which is distributed on the internet. The third use case which we will talk about is around how do you actually overall improve customer experience. I think this is one area where we have had tremendous amount of success during this lockdown phase, where customers really thought their physical process. They looked at what their current physical process is. Why does a person walk into a store? Why does a person walk into a showroom? Why does a person walk into a branch? And convert, can I look at why he walks in, and can I convert all that physical process to a more omni-channel process? Okay, and can I give the customer the flexibility to select any channel, come into my environment, convert that same physical process which the customer is comfortable with, and address that requirement. So this is an area where we have seen a lot of action from customers in order to actually change their front end sales process to a more digital process, along with an interactive digital process, if I were to say that. This migration is also what we have seen. Is migration is going to the cloud, of this omni-channel process, and all this has to have a tight integration to compliance. So what we have done here is we have created a completely digital customer experience platform, which is omni-channel in experience, the ability to actually access information and hooking back into your ecosystem through API and API gateways, and ensuring that we can orchestrate it through a single pane of glass. So these were some of the areas which we touched upon on use cases. Very clearly, every customer is unique and has a unique model of operation. And some of these customer experience stories have been very, very customized to meet their individual requirements as far as the platform is concerned. So these are some of the thoughts. I just want to leave it with you as we roll it back to the team for the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nair. That was very interesting. I think that leaves us with food for thought for the rest of our panel discussion. Asking all our panelists to join on video as well as switch on their mics so we can start with our panel discussion. Thank you. Also, I encourage all our viewers to drop in their questions at the Q&A section using the button at the bottom of the screen, and we will take a few select questions at the end of our session. So my first question is really to all our panelists. These past 6 months have been especially a little sort of maddening for most of the industry, right? I mean, we found new ways to do our work. Many of our employees are working from home, and the roles and the core roles responsibility that you're handling inside your companies. I mean, have you seen network performance issues as more and more people work from home, and how have you sort of what are the challenges? How have you solved these? Maybe Mr. Saxena, you could start.
Yeah, so when the COVID-19 started, so primarily all organizations, I would say, face four kind of problem. One was rapid adoption of remote work practices and tools. The second one was managing cost during economic uncertainty. Third one was the rapid capacity expansion of VPN and VDI. And the fourth one was the most important, where you wanted to provide us access to the sensitive data on untrusted devices and networks. Okay, so yes, in the beginning we face certain problems, and everyone, I guess, face this kind of problem of network connectivity as well as providing access of environments to the our employees. And but slowly we moved on, and now I think it is pretty much stabilized. Other than the network connectivity, as well as sometimes the certain scenarios, we right now we don't face any type of connectivity when it comes to work from home.
Right. Mr. Miswani, would you like to add to that? What kind of network performance have you faced over the past year?
Rudra, I can give you a very unique perspective being a from service provider. I can give both IBM as being a large consumer of technology themselves with a very large presence of manpower in India and globally, and we service many clients as well. So I can give perspective from both sides. So first, looking at from we as an organization, with more than 300,000 people globally, and overnight kind of people shift. 96% of people shifted to work from home. And while I say overnight, a lot of planning activity went even before actually lockdown announced, right? So we had various BCP scenario created, and kind of it went into different stages. So that way it was very well planned and well thought out, and all the issues including security, performance, all this was well thought out, and hence as such we as a consumer of the technology within the organization, we never faced an issue. Second, if I see from our experience, so I manage West region, and similarly we have, at an overall country level, we manage infrastructure for some of the largest organizations in the country, right? So I can give a perspective that maybe more than 30,000 people who we would have enabled working from home, right? And many of them, in a matter of few days or few weeks, we made them change. So I found that many of the Indian clients really work very innovatively. They started off with providing a selective application remote access. Even to some extent, we have enabled few of the laptops being delivered or to the home of people, facilitating bring your own devices. So Indian clients have tried various things. So yes, few clients did face initially issue of performance, but they quickly, either changed the capacity on the firewall and the VPN concentrator. They expanded the net bandwidth. So all those things done, but I think this was done quite rapidly, and we had very encouraging feedback for our team. In fact, the maximum positive feedback we got is during pandemic, that people were really happy the way we have delivered and remained with the client during that time. So I would say, as such, yes, it was well managed. Otherwise, nothing specific.
Interesting, and especially this is the time when the IT's backbone of any company sort of came into the fore, and the entire limelight is on your team, and making sure that you need to deliver. Mr. Shanbag, maybe a word from you here as well, and especially, I mean, the scale that HDFC operates in this country is massive, right? I mean, one of the largest banks in the country. How did you deal with network performance issues over there?
So if you ask me, initially, of course, nobody was prepared. Everybody got surprised. So we deal with around 1.5 lakh of employees, right, working from office, and one certain day, we've been asked to, work from home. Luckily, while we got by surprise, but yes, we were being, ready the next day. If you ask me, what we did was we invoked our BCP plan. We ensured that teams, in various cities started working in alternate mechanism. For example, if Mumbai, had announced lockdown, we ensured the Delhi people were, up and ensuring that they were supporting the, required back offices. Second, what we did was we rapidly scaled our VDI infrastructure and network infrastructure in a matter of days to ensure that, the people are operational from home. Yes, like the other gentleman mentioned, we invested heavily in procurement of laptops to ensure that everybody who is at home would be able to operate and connect to the VDI or maybe take remote desktop of their desktops which are there in the office and are up and running. Because we are a traditional organization, right? In banking, we are bound by regulations, the auditory requirements, the RBI regulations, and then of course we have to see that our apps are, secured to the core of it. So keeping that in mind, it was very, very important for us to see that we maintain that balance. We should not just go with BYOD concept because that's the easiest way for us to do. So we invested heavily on some cloud tools as well. We moved our application into DMC, ensured that those applications are accessible over the internet. We also, in a period of around 2 weeks or so, we made our applications operate from mobile as well. Not all, but their back office operations. At least they could be home and they don't need to rely upon their VDI infrastructure for that matter. So MDM was something where we scaled our applications. But yes, there was a challenge which persisted with us for at least 3 months or so is the users. While we can put all the efforts to enable the user from an organizational standpoint, but if I am a user who is staying in a remote area, so if you talk about semi-rural, rural area, he has poor connectivity, right, with respect to Wi-Fi. Secondly, generally human tendency is, they don't invest in Wi-Fi. When you're home, we know our internet is there on my mobile. Why should I, invest on Wi-Fi? So when they were home, they used to use their mobile connectivity to connect to VDI and access the network. That was a challenge.
Sorry, you mean employees who moved back to their homes in more remote areas, right?
Right. So that became a challenge because every now and then you have to complain, the VDI is not working, it's very slow. But that's not the problem with the organization, but it's your, ISP tower, it's not giving you the right amount of connectivity. So those were some of the issues that we faced initially. But then later on, we ensured that, the unit heads, vertical heads, ensure that they cascade the right information to the users, the employees, ensure that they buy the right Wi-Fi connection with the right speed and, mobilize them to be operational.
Right. And these network performance issues, I mean, you're saying, do they exist even today, or have you been able to largely get a grip over this challenge over the past few months?
Yeah, that's been handled quite well. Like I mentioned, from the employee standpoint, that was something that we put efforts in the right direction. In a month's time, we were there, where we used to be.
Right. Mr. Nair, what are some of these possible solutions for network performance issues? We had a very detailed presentation right now, and we saw that. But, some of the innovation that our speakers here did, especially with an organization of that scale, and especially BFSI, where security plays a major role. So how have you sort of seen things evolve over the past few months? What are the solutions that you have offered? Any anecdotes that you can talk about?
Yeah, so when the lockdown happened, I think there was some quick fix VDIs were put in place. Network, aggregation was done. Yes, scale in some customers was a problem statement because especially when you talk about IT and when there is a younger crowd, they started being in the city and then they quickly went back to their hometowns, and that's when certain interesting things started happening because the performance was an issue initially. I think what was told is actually an anecdote which we saw where people, when they went back to their hometowns, there is only one kind of broadband connection and maybe a cable operator who's also offering you an alternate kind of cable broadband connection with limited capacity. So this was a challenge. Now, in order to actually overcome some of this, yes, what I heard is, one was a communication structure. The other one which we saw is that, okay, can we have some mechanism to actually ensure quality on whatever be the connection? Now what I don't want to sell a dream here and say that when the connection is bad, you're going to have a better connection. It's whatever be the connection, can you actually improve your performance on that connection? And for that, it is the way you look at the data. The data itself, ultimately, at a technical level, we use TCP data. And in case there is some way to actually compress it and use it as voice, which is much, much, much leaner and thinner, it becomes a lot more efficient. So that's what we try to look at. When you look at VDI connections, there can be some sessions which are, a VDI connection is quite thin normally. Okay, but if the customers have not gone, and in case you don't have, especially in ITES customers, you are dependent on that connection going all the way abroad. Okay, so because you're running out of a data center probably in US or Europe or wherever, and you're actually offering that connection at, going down to the smallest town in India. Can you actually ensure that the quality can be improved? And those are areas where we offered specialized app WAN solutions, which was useful for the customer in order to actually ensure that a compression was established on the fly. It was just a license. They didn't have to do anything disruptive. There was no hardware to be bought or no extra effort to be done. It was all centrally managed, and you can see the performance. Most importantly is the noise. I think which Siddharth said, is a noise which you get from pockets, especially on month ends if things don't work. Okay, so what is your ability to actually react and fix? Okay, that ability to actually see what the problem is and be able to address it, despite you can't control which connectivity you can get in any remote site. You won't get a premium kind of connectivity. You have to make do with what you have. And can you actually accelerate? Can you actually secure? Can you actually provide better quality on that? That was the key area we kind of focused on.
Interesting. So solving the challenge of low bandwidth situation in remote places, and how do you sort of be innovative there? I mean, this is interesting. Using voice instead of TCP, right? So that has worked for most companies, is it?
Yeah, quite a lot of companies it has helped, because what happens just at a ratio level, if you really look at it, every IP TCP packet, if I were to call it, it is at 1500 bytes. Okay. That gets compressed to less than 70 to 80 bytes. So 1500 is, so we saw in certain cases, improvement as high as 10x. Okay, so, but you can't still control. I mean, what I don't want people to think and take away is that if the connection is bad and you're having a lot of jitter, you're going to suddenly have an improvement. But what you can do is people open up, applications, multiple applications on their laptops, and each of these consume capacity. They don't know about it, but can you actually do something about it? And not every industry goes into for VDI. There are some industries which focus on VDI, and VDI is a good practice if you are going remote. But many IT companies don't do it. Many businesses don't do it. So can you actually figure out a way to actually still manage a better quality? Yeah.
Right. So my question, and this is again to everybody, what are some of these innovative solutions something Mr. Nair mentioned, but which can also help organizations focus on the productivity of employees, right? I mean, in the past few months, and how have you sort of solved these challenges? Maybe Mr. Miswani, you could start off talking about your example or some of the companies that you work with as I.
Yeah, sure. So first, let me put a little bit innovation in a generic form. This is enormous and unprecedented changes that we've been going through, because I've been in industry for a long time, and I can tell you, and we have some of the fellow colleagues who are from financial industry. For them, remote working, it was completely no in terms of regulatory issues and everything. Now, like everything has changed. Now, if you see two examples I want to give. First is on the tech side, some of the largest event, including IBM Think Forum and some of the other large event, which used to be like 50,000 people, 100,000 people gathering in one large event, has gone completely digital, and still it managed to have capture much more audience in much more engaging way. And the way we have seen during Think Forum, how people could engage with speakers and kind of have a one-to-one forum and all this kind of in a virtual world, I feel this was really a kind of eye-opener kind of thing, right? And this is feasible. In fact, if I take the same analogy on Indian side, one of our client hold their first annual general meeting completely electronically on the video meeting and with significant number of shareholders present compared to past AGM. And and we were managing infrastructure, so we kind of thought that wow, suddenly you will have an, if obviously promoter wants more investor to join AGM, it's a different discussion, but that was one part. Second is on the education. I think some of the innovation on education will come over to corporate side because there are significant innovation being planned, being experimented as we talk. So if you see the remote exams and content delivery, education delivery, so particularly artificial intelligence usage in managing exams, right? I think it has a great potential to empower BFSI remote workers, or for that matter, any teleworker who has access to confidential information. I think one of the biggest threat or a risk perception for BFSI client is how do we give access to the call center agent who is in remote and they access the sensitive information from their home, right? And they try a bits of solution, but I think AI has a significant potential to reduce that threat perception and kind of address many of the open concerns that people still have, right? So these are the things. Rest, I think overall people have done a lot of tactical innovation in managing this entire change, right? So that's how I would sum it up.
And that's interesting as well. A lot of the tactical innovation, which have sort of been reactions to the market situation,
Yeah.
are very interesting stories out there. I mean, every time we have these discussions, such wonderful anecdotes come out. Mr. Saxena, over to you from a Kotak Mahindra point of view, or also, overall in the industry. What kind of these innovative solutions have you seen that has helped improve productivity of the workforce over the past?
See, one of the things which we all must have been facing since we are working from home, and our family, we share that home with our family, with our kids, and most of the time it becomes challenging to work because obviously kids have to play, they cannot go out, family has to talk to each other. One of the key innovation which I saw some time back was that the noise cancellation. How can you avoid the only listening to the sound of the speaker, but avoid all the noises which are there in the background? So, which is actually, and I have seen that technology being replicated by Microsoft Teams also. Perhaps Zoom have not taken up, and you can still see hear the background noises which are coming from my house or anybody's house. But this is the one thing which, and then that something called a spotlight, when you are collaborating and you want that the specific person has to be there present in front of everyone. Then that kind of thing, yes, I have seen people are doing, and a lot of things has to be done for collaborating between the teams.
Interesting. I mean, there's this noise cancellation. There's the blur thing where everything behind you gets blurred out, and it's
Right.
these are innovations of technology front. But I'm actually also thinking about what you would have done from a company point of view, Mr. Shanbag, about SDFC. I mean, again, you did mention about the challenges with working with the remote workforce. But what kind of other productivity enhancement,
So if you ask me, we have been, doing POC of a lot of solutions. While it's difficult to adopt all these solutions, but yes, one of the solutions which we found very interesting was, now that we are having the workforce operating from home, and then in banking, they have access to transaction data, customer data, sensitive data, which they shouldn't be sharing with anyone. Now, keeping that in mind, I am home and I'm in front of my laptop. How would I ensure that I am not, transferring this data to somebody else? While you have all the tools in the world, DLP, you talk about antivirus, DLP protection on email, but you can't stop me from physically, capturing the data and sending it to somebody, right?
Right.
Once I'm home, it's isolated. So here the solution was, you have an AI-based camera. It will, if somebody is next to me piggybacking my screen, it will just block the access. The screen will be totally blocked. Unless and until it recognizes me in front of the machine, it will never allow somebody to, look at my screen. That was one. So I think that was very fascinating. Second productivity tool that we have seen is that the there is a AI-based platform. What it does is it will look at if Sushil has to work on two, three solutions or tools. It will keep track of me being on that tool throughout the day. If, for example, I am supposed to be on Excel and I'm supposed to do a certain task, it will keep a track on that entire day how much time I actually spent on doing that job, and that is a productive measure that will be again been given to the manager. So what happens is I as a employee am glued to my work, and I know that somebody's tracking. While both these two things have to be cautiously rolled out, because unless and until you give a transparency to your end employee saying that this is what has been rolled out, sometimes it can pose a negative impact also, because you're home, your privacy can be compromised if you piggybacking is from an office work standpoint. But I'm with my family, I'm talking, I'm chit chatting on a personal level, the this can be misused in some way or the other, right? So that is something that has to be also informed. So there are pros and cons when you look at these solutions before you can think of rolling them out. But they are very interesting.
Interesting. So, are these the solution that you mentioned? Have they been rolled out, or are they in a pilot or a test phase?
No, they are not rolled out. Yes, they are in testing phases.
Interesting. Yeah, because there's always the worry anybody can come from behind and take a screenshot from their phone, right? I mean, how do you prevent that? I mean, you can stop it from the computer.
Right.
Very interesting. Mr. Mr. Ms. Wani, this is for you, a specific question. We are living in an omni-channel world. What role can technology play in ensuring employee engagement and agent productivity in this scenario?
Okay, so first I would say, so we are actually not into a typical call center business, but I can tell you from employee engagement, I consider this as one of the most important aspect, and fortunately, I have seen all being rolled out in IBM for the internal team, and it's phenomenal. So first is kind of usage of tools like Slack and Mural, right? The way it has increased. It just happened that we had Slack rolled out in the start of the year, and the usage was very less. Because it was new, we moved from other platform to Slack, and it was starting, and then come this pandemic situation, and then suddenly it kind of you have really all information, including for COVID, all available on Slack, and it became almost prevalent. It's like now part of our day job. The way you see email, Slack has become as prevalent for us. Second is Mural has become a really important tool for collaborating. So we rolled out Agile for our delivery team. Okay, so that has become a very important tool for entire agile way of delivery, managing through Mural. So that has become important. Now, these are all I'm talking about tools used for engagement. But if I go and see beyond that, the most important part is how do we keep employee engaged when they're remote? There is a loneliness. Sometimes they just missed that office thing, right? So we introduced concept of coffee hours, where a small group of managers connect with their team over coffee. We had a town hall with the cultural clubs and cultural nights with the team, including we got the family to come and present. We had a yoga session in the morning for multiple days. So kind of really people came with various ideas, and it was not that all top down. It was not that okay, as a management, we decided that this we need to roll out for the team. Some of them were there for the benefit, but a lot of things and idea came from ground up. People were kind of, because they were looking to remain engaged, right? So this was one important part. And second thing, what we learned was managing stress. What we have seen for few individuals, and we specifically focused on that. See, particularly when we as a service provider handle client situation, that to many of them, most of them, I would say remotely, right? At that time, anyway, there is a higher demand on the infrastructure team, and overall stress level of team who is leading the overall services increases. And how to earlier they used to connect with few individuals over coffee or sometimes with the client, and that kind of change their mood. But right now, keeping them stress free is really important. So we had to have a special provision for managing stress, one-to-one engagement. We had actual professionals who engage with the team. So that was another aspect that I want to highlight, right? So which again I consider as a part of overall our engagement, program.
Very interesting. I think not only engagement, but keeping employee motivation up is
Absolutely.
really, critical at this time. I mean, these are hard times, and I think one of the things I've seen is that most companies have come with an attitude like, let's treat it like one big family. We are all in this together. So what are these challenges? And I think leadership has played a significant role in such cases. Mr. Shanbag, I mean, how can organizations ensure a great customer experience even when employees are working remotely? I mean, one is obviously employee engagement, but the ultimate goal is also to make sure that customers have a great experience with the brand.
So if you ask me, again, you're doing business for the customers, right? Ultimately, everything revolves around the customer. And come what may, even if you're home or you are working from some location, your focus should be customer oriented. Now, the key element here is to be available for the customer, right? So you need to have better UIs, user interfaces, communication channel. You can have, you can take AI into pictures, smart bots. I'm sure most of the organizations have smart bots where the customer can do some self service and then can get queries to his request. But I've seen that's not enough. We should harness the data that we already have. From a customer service standpoint, look at the data for why they come to us. While generally, if you look at the traditional apps of most of the organizations, they look at only addressing 10 or 15 top issues that the customer face, where the chatbot will answer and remediate the problem. But that's not enough. I have seen myself. I had a credit card problem with one of the banks, and unfortunately, it was in April. I tried to contact the customer support. Nobody was there, and I was getting an automated service message. And I tried to use their chatbot mechanism. Every time I asked a question, they never had the answers there. It would again take me back to a traditional question, and it was annoying. So I wrote a message or a mail to somebody. It took 10-15 days for them to come back, and again, without even reading my mail, they are giving me a standard reply. We are down because of this pandemic. Please bear with us. You're losing the customer when you do this. I know you are in the problem, but understand the customer is also in a problem. So you can't dump him just because my infra is not ready, right? So you have to see that first and foremost, while you are enabling your employees, you should also ensure the customer is onboarded, given the right treatment, and you're available for him at any point in time. Use all the methods which are already there, like self-service automation is one key area where you should focus. You have the websites, we have all the tools and techniques. Try to use the data which we already have, and that's the key, I guess.
Right. Interesting. I've faced a similar challenge as well. The IVRs keep sending you in a loop, and then the call gets cut, and you have to start from the same starting point again. And went through this 4 times, and then finally managed a conversation with a customer. Okay, same credit card issue, but I understand what you're saying, and if Mr. Saxena wants to add to that, I mean, how do you look at customer experience in this sort of a scenario where all employees are working remotely?
So first thing I want to clarify, and I'm very sure on that Mr. Sushil's credit card was not a Kotak Mahindra Bank because we offer excellent service to our customers, and no matter it was a COVID times or pandemic or any scenario, we gave very
neither Kotak, neither not SDFC. I just
So coming back to the question that see, it was a changing demand. The market trends was actually changed from pre-COVID time to post-COVID time. Pre-COVID, we were actually working on enhancing customer experience. Post-COVID, we were actually boosting customer trust. Okay, like the problem which Sushil highlighted. Pre-COVID, we were actually driving closer collaboration, learning physically. But after that, in post-COVID, we were actually working on improving our remote connectivity. Then previously, we were doing on product innovation. Now we were fortifying our core. Like whatever we have to ensure that it is up and running and available to our customers. Previously, we were more interested in increasing the profitability and shareholder value. But after post COVID, in fact, all organizations were balancing their profitability and employee satisfaction. That because some people faced a difficult time of where they got pink slip, and some where it was a pay cut they have taken voluntarily, involuntarily, as well as actually all organizations face difficult times in post COVID. So obviously, the market trends and the requirements and customer satisfaction definition has changed after that. And indeed, I would agree with Mr. Sushil that intelligence is to the rescue. You should know what your customer wants. And in the COVID time also, the analytics played an important role in finding out what customer wants and targeting the customer the right product to them.
Right, right. Mr. Nair, over to you. How are service providers helping call centers continue in the new normal? What is your experience been with call centers?
Okay, from an overall customer experience perspective, what we saw is two kinds of play. I mean, one was the initial call centers, which had to be up and running as quickly as possible. Government had given some, call centers in India are highly regulated, especially their voice call centers. And what you guys just told me very clearly is that you don't like your IVR and you don't like your chatbots, and you want to actually ultimately all of us want to land up at that agent, and we're searching for that digit where I can get to an agent. Okay, so there was this challenge of it being a regulated voice, being a regulated kind of a scenario. We had to do certain things specifically for our customers. This was done quite quickly, in the initial lockdown phase itself, because that part of the business could not be stopped. And there were challenges as people moved to their homes. Some of these, like we have two panelists who are bankers. They know that they some of them actually wanted to shift their entire desktop to the home. They wouldn't work on any other because BYOD was not a policy, and there was not a ready-made policy to actually ship new laptops. So, but these were all addressed, and the basic idea was to actually bring that customer, agent live with what they were doing as quickly as possible. But an interesting trend which we saw is when customers actually said, "Okay, I have moved away from the branch, but my branch was doing most of my business. Then what do I do about it? Okay, I'm not going to have that walking customer who is looking for an quick resolution to a problem, or more importantly, it could be a new customer asking for me for a home loan. So the smart thing which I heard also the panelists say is, number one, through analytics they targeted the customers. That was one way, but we all know how good we are with a random call coming on our mobile phone and us being very cooperative with such a person, versus being little targeted and addressing if someone has accessed digitally your environment, then having a follow-up nudge through an SMS, then having a follow-up nudge through a contact center. So these were some things which we saw a lot of, and that enablement was something which we found useful. I think there were plenty of use cases where customers were actually analyzing, where are they dropping the customer? Okay, where like I like what Sushil said. It is a fact that sometimes we become so creative in our IT systems that we make the customer go around the tree. Okay, so. I think the idea was that can you spot such a frustrated customer and address it somewhat differently. I know that some of the banks had a very standard policy that when a customer called for complaining, they were able to actually upsell to that customer a new product. Okay, so that was pre-COVID. Now, how do you actually get back to that in a more targeted fashion? Was something which we saw. Also, we saw even on, let's say, the retail space where people were stopped going into a shop and a showroom. How do you actually do something about it? I think there were some interesting use cases which we saw. You can obviously buy a television on Amazon, but you want to actually see the television. You want to speak to some expert who can buy that television, and then you want to actually buy it. you don't go ahead and just buy a television, maybe one major investment which you may be doing, online. So you want to talk to an expert. Now, can you enable that? Those were the interesting customer experience parts which we kind of, found people extending their current digital platform to a more new environment. So that we definitely saw as a new improvement.
Very interesting stuff. This is my last question, and this is a very broad question that I'm sort of throwing to everybody. Um, and this is really looking forward to being prepared for such a black swan event happening again. I mean, we've seen something happen when most companies were not prepared, and we certainly sort of scampered to deal with it. And by most accounts, most companies have dealt with it pretty bravely, pretty fine, found innovative solutions. Now, the question is that is our IT infra flexible for dealing with the next pandemic that might occur? It might be a similar pandemic, it might be completely environmental, but some sort of a black swan challenge like this. What have been your long-term learnings out of the pandemic from an IT infrastructure point of view, and your views on making your IT infrastructure flexible for dealing with something like this in the future? Maybe Mr. Meswani, you could start.
Yeah, so thanks, Rudra. See, the way I look at is that this pandemic has kind of tested preparedness for a lot of companies as to how do they react, both using technology and using process wise as to how they use their people, process, and technology to address such emerging situation, right? And I think overall, I'm quite positive that people are well prepared. But the three areas in which I would say that people should always take care is, I would say, security, engagement. We covered engagement as well, and well-being. These are the three things which, if they cover well, they will do for the employee well, and if employee doing well, they will do well for the clients as well. Right? So security, increasingly, if I see the amount of attack which has increased during the pandemic times, phenomenal. We as a service provider can clearly see the amount of this threat perception which has increased. That's really high, and the entry points are various. Whether it's the distributed, your Active Directory, or your remote workforce who has not deployed VPN solution and accessing some of the applications, various things. Their workstations or their mobile devices are not compliant. So security is, I think, is the top of the priority, right? Whenever you want to prepare for this. And second part is, one is security, but what do you do after you are faced with the event? Right, that's the most important. That company now should, if they have not been hit, but this is the right time that they should think and try it out once as to what happens in case if we have a ransomware attack. Are we going to be at mercy of the these goons, cyber goons, or we can recover from our gold copy, right? So they need to have their planning in place. They need to have the tools and technology in place to address that. So that's on the security side, and it's a much wider topic. Second part is engagement, as I said, and we covered a little bit in my previous point, right? But that's extremely important, that keeping employee motivated and delivering to customer satisfaction, that's extremely important. If you don't have a motivated and engaged employee, they will not deliver to your client satisfaction, right? So that's a very fundamental part. And the third part, as I said, is well-being, both physical and mental well-being. Right? So physical well-being, we have seen people with not a right ergonomic place to operate, can have really problem on their physical health, right? And at the same time, mental health also becomes extremely critical, even more than the physical health, is because of the stress, as many of my fellow colleagues said, in terms of the house environment, some of the house duties, which could kind of really, kind of conflicting with the office work never ending. It's your day just doesn't end, right? With all this, that stress, how do you manage and ensure that employee doesn't burn out, right? So again, as I said, 3 points, if we keep in mind, rest, there are enough technology and evolving at a much rapid pace technology, and the tools will be available. But if we take care of security engagement and third one is this well-being, then I think we will be very well prepared for any upcoming pandemic or recurrence of wave three or whatever we call it. We will be well prepared.
Mr. Saxena, what are your long-term learnings out of this pandemic from IT infrastructure?
So what I would say, what Mr. Meswani said is I can't agree more with him. So, but for the future pandemic, if something we have to learn, it still lies in the data analytics. If we divide the current pandemic since it started in March and I think it's 9 months now. So if we divide it into four phases, so first phase was when the lockdown was started. So we at all companies or every organization was focusing on providing remote learning and training and making VPN available, collaborating, video conferencing. Then came the second part of our this pandemic where the everyone was after the cost optimization because the slowdown was coming in. People were getting pink slip. People were taking pay cuts. So there the focus was on process automation. How can you automate the process? Right? How can you serve the customer without any manual intervention? Then a second thing was again that making VPN available for your all workforce and collaboration. Then the third came with the sustenance of recession, what we called as, and there the foremost important thing which people realize that cloud computing is actually the future, where even if no collaboration, no modern work spaces is not possible without collaborating or without engaging in cloud platforms. And the second important thing was the data security, which Mr. Miswani has rightly highlighted that we have seen the increase in number of ransomware attacks in the last 6-8 months, and it is in many folds. One around I read somewhere it is 150% has increased in the last 6 months, and the data insight was the fourth focus area where people wanted to understand what customer is after and what target, what product they can pitch in. The fourth last quarter where the actually the festival time started, where economy started coming back to the what is called as recovery phase. Okay, and we have seen that again the cloud computing, because the demand has increased, you want the agility to increase your infrastructure, right? So cloud computing played an important role in increasing meeting your infrastructure demands as per your need, because it was a festival time and everyone was wanted to utilize that period. And the second again the remote learning and employee engagement. So after all these, if we can find out what's the basic learning, one was obviously remote learning, second one was collaboration, third was the process automation, and fourth is cloud computing, security, as well as data insights. So this is my learning, which actually would every organization should be doing it in order to prepare themselves for the next pandemic. Having said that, it actually needed a pandemic for all of us to collaborate. Earlier, nobody was talking about that, but after during the pandemic and after, I hope it should get over soon. And now everybody's talking about the collaboration. That's a good thing which has came out of the pandemic.
Right. So the irony is, I mean, all of this should have happened without a pandemic. Unfortunately, what it took us to make the collaboration happen. Mr. Shanbag, any thoughts on this? What are your learnings for the and also from an IT infrastructure point of view? I mean, what are your learnings and how do you make it flexible in dealing with a similar situation if it ever happens again?
I hope we don't fall in this situation, at least in our lifetime. Okay, I really hope that. Because it's really scary and it's really chaotic.
It's still scary. Even now.
Yeah. Yes. And if you ask me, there are a lot of learnings, but some things which come to my mind distinctly are mobility. Of course, I agree with Mr. Meswani. Security is paramount. Okay? Without that, we can't, play around or fiddle around with our IT solutions. Because ultimately, whatever is happening is going to happen the way it is, or either it's going to increase. Mobility is the key. Now, specifically organizations like us who have massive workforce, we heavily invest in desktops, right? Because we have 9 to 5 kind of shift. Somebody will come to office, will work on his desktop, go home, and they can come back like a factory worker. But now things have changed. We have to have them work from home. We had to procure laptops, but that was again a temporary kind of an arrangement. On a long-term perspective, we should look at BYOD as a concept. while security is not compromised, having robust kind of a mechanism. Second is, convert desktop to laptops, because desktops, I know it looks very nice when the desktops will move home in some of the organizations, and you still have to update, but it becomes challenging from a serviceability standpoint. Something goes down, you have to carry that laptop back to office. Now, in between now, if you know, we are still allowing some people to come to office at least once or twice a week, right? How are you going to carry that desktop back to office? So from a long-term perspective, we should look at workforce given a laptop or a BYOD, or or the third option is, you should have agile applications. We, from a organization standpoint, we have plenty of applications which are traditionally made in-house, and they don't operate outside the network. We have to see how we cascade, bring them into DMZ, like I mentioned in my earlier discussion as well, and make them app ready or mobile ready in a container platform where it can't be, again, it is in a secure environment. But that will help you to reduce the kind of friction that we had to deal in this interim period. Right, and what fourth one, of course, like the gentleman mentioned, cloud computing again is something that is picking up because of the current scenario, and I think that's going to be the need of the hour going forward. Because I think most of the organizations see that as a benefit, mostly from a cost perspective as well, rather than investing in heavy licenses when you are procuring desktops, the operating system, the management part of it. You can do away with the cloud computing coming into picture, but again, your applications have to be internet ready. Unless they are, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, this is a very interesting point. I think going forward, most applications will have to be developed with the mindset that they should be, from your own device, you should be able to operate them, not from your office intranet or office computer. Mr. Nair, any closing thoughts to this before I sum up our discussion for today?
No, I think I think very good inputs coming from all the panelists. I like the way Sushil kind of articulated the whole process and how it went through various phases, and very well articulated by everyone, including the security elements of it, the overall network compute, as well as how the journey is happening. I think from a future perspective, we looked at it from an infrastructure. I think from the business side, what are the challenges? How does a business come back to speed or have the ability to actually change their business model as quickly as possible? And how does IT enable for doing that is something I'll just add to the mix. That rethinking and the ability for IT to react on that rethink is something which we have seen, is an interesting challenge, where IT has collaborated and created something totally new and said that, okay, even if this pandemic were to continue, or even if it is ending, can I use my infrastructure in a way that it can still continue to play out properly, and actually help customers in actually ensuring my business reach is not impacted. That contact center example, I'm going to reuse that. That's a very interesting scenario which we all faced, especially in the early days. But I think things improve over time, and that's something which I think can be added to the mix. That learning of ability to handle a new business change, a new environment, and how do I actually react to it in a structured manner. That is something which we can always bring more to the table. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nair. I think I'll just quickly sum up our discussion for today before my closing sort of comments. My first question was on network performance issues faced over the past few months. Mr. Saxena mentioned, one of the biggest challenges was managing cost and ensuring rapid adoption of and capacity expansion of VPN and VDI. Also, one of the most common themes across our discussion today was, of course, security on untrusted devices. Considering we have two panelists from the BFSI sector, two banks, so security is definitely one of the biggest themes of our conversation. Mr. Miswani mentioned that for IBM, at least, the fact that the change was well thought out with proper VCP planning, and many Indian clients also worked very innovatively, in terms of laptop delivery. I addressed a lot of initial issues of network performance, but these were solved very rapidly. Mr. Shanbag on network's performance issues and how the past 6 months were managed. A very interesting point given the 1.5 lakh employees of SDFC Bank was that most applications were moved to the cloud. Many laptops were delivered, but definitely one of the biggest challenges that faced by the bank was the fact that many employees have moved back to their homes in smaller cities and rural areas where the connections are weak. And how do you sort of deal with such a challenge? So new processes, etc., with their managers would have to be formed to handle such a situation. Mr. Nair mentioned a very interesting thing there. One of the ways that companies have dealt with this is to ensure an innovation is to convert TCP data to voice, where you can, a large amount of packet data can be converted to much smaller size, and thereby you're able to run more applications on a similar bandwidth, on one bandwidth. I think this is a very interesting thing. Many of our companies would have used it. In terms of innovative solutions, in this period, Mr. Miswani mentioned that virtual forums have actually seen the engagement to increase. One is, of course, the IBM Think Forum, which is a major global event every year. But also, you mentioned that an AGM of a firm actually saw more shareholders participate. This is interesting because it also means that many people have, the adoption of virtual environments, of virtual connectivity is far more than we initially believed. And the fact that it also lets a lot more people who are not maybe comfortable traveling actually be a part of these events. I mean, elderly people is one example, right? I mean, they may be shareholders and they can finally connect. This is a wonderful anecdote. Also, another anecdote from Mr. Shahbag in terms of security was how AR-based cameras are being used to sort of ensure that only the information meant for the personal he's able to view it. Even family members, if somebody else comes from a site, may not be able to view it. This is great from a security perspective. I think all of us find it very important. Of course, there are privacy concerns. There are other concerns there. You really need to inform in terms of transparency. But these technologies need to start playing a bigger role I'm sure the remote work environment is going to stay for a long time across industries. In terms of employee engagement, a big point that Mr. Shanbag mentioned, and I think also Mr. Miswani mentioned, was about reducing stress and involving families and building the focus on building motivation and a culture, which is one of the biggest areas and a very important area of the past few months. And also, when asked that what are your learnings and how would you deal with a similar situation? Again, Mr. Meswani did mention that employee engagement out of the 3 points is a very important point, because unless your employee is engaged, he will not be able to deliver to the fullest in terms of a customer experience. In terms of customer experience, I think Mr. Shanbag mentioned that self-service automation is one way. We spoke about examples of how it is important for companies to be available for a customer always. And there have been, companies have been through a very challenging time, but so have customers, right? And honestly, customers' patience is, of course, limited in many cases, and you don't want to lose them. So how do you learn more about their customers? Mr. Saxena mentioned that analytics is the key here, learning more and more about what your customer needs, edge analytics across several platforms, and being able to sort of solve for their problem sometimes even before they realize it's a problem, right? In terms of a future pandemic, Mr. Masmani again had a very clearly laid out 3 points. If we have to deal with a similar situation in the future again, we need to be prepared from a security point of view. We need to look at the engagement of our employees, and most importantly and lastly, the well-being of physical and mental for our employees in order for them to cater to our customers. Mr. Saxena, and these security and these points were both agreed with Mr. Saxena and Mr. Shanbag. The other 2 important points was clearly that cloud computing is the future, and from a banking point of view, mobility is definitely going to be the key, and developing agile applications to work outside of office networks. I think we have summed up our discussion well for today. A lot of interesting anecdotes as always. I think the great part is the way our companies in this country have, and I think globally as well, the way companies have reacted to the situation and come up with very innovative solutions is really sparks a lot of confidence on the way we are dealing with the situation. Hopefully, we don't have to deal with something like this again. This brings us to the end of our discussion. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to especially thank our guest speakers for taking the time out to share their valuable insights with us. A big shout out to Tata Communications for partnering with us for this series. We will be back again soon with the next episode.
Rudra, there is a question from one gentleman.
So you want to address that? I thought Mr.
Okay, fine.
Tambag had already spoken about it. So this lady, Anshuma Singh, has asked, is there any tool you are using to prevent screen capture? I think he had mentioned the example of the pilot test they're doing, which is why I didn't ask it.
Oh, okay, thanks. No problem. If it's addressed, it's fine. Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thank you for joining us today. To all our panelists, a big shout out to Tata Communications. We will be back again soon with the next episode. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.